Okay, we're back, and we have a major Senate hearing that's happened since the last time you and I have had a chance to sit down, and we look at parts of the country that continue to reopen. We look at parts of the country that maybe shouldn't be reopening and are defying local government. I mean, it's gone crazy in some areas in the political area, but as always, we look to you as far as the data and the medical area. So as far as Tuesday is concerned, a big day where Dr. Fauci was talking in front of the Senate, some of the things that came, not even from verbatim what he said, but just some themes and takeaways, it seems as if there is a conflicting belief on whether or not a vaccine can exist in the fall. And that seems to be something where a lot of people are going back and forth on.
All right. So again, thanks for putting the question in and the background. Let's put it this way. Let's first of all let's first of all put the compartment of the vaccine aside, because to develop a vaccine takes time. It's not something that is invented. It requires, again, the antibodies, which are created by the agent, and then getting something which can actually fight that antigen, actually, and fight that antigen with an antibody that actually can destroy it or put it away, which means that it needs to circulate or be revived each time there's an exposure to the antigen, which is, in this point, the virus. So to get all that worked out, it takes time. It's not something simple, because first of all, not every antibody may be successful. And two, if you're creating an antigen to create the antibody, you don't want it to make you sick. See what I'm saying? So right. It is not a simple matter to just get it done. And to rush it, what you may end up getting is vaccines which don't perform well. So to say that we're going to have a vaccine by the beginning of the school year is kind of far-fetched from a scientific point of view. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't have one done. There's a possibility that, with new technologies and the fact that everybody's rushing to get a vaccine, that we may get something. But I think what we want is a vaccine that has some long-lasting effects, or the longest possible lasting effect, which is at least a year. Mm-hmm. As you know, we get vaccinated for the flu on an annual basis. If the vaccine had long-lasting effect, meaning it responded to any virus within that group, then you'd get it once and maybe get a booster every once in a while, but not an annual. So I think that's what we're looking for, is something that can carry at least a year of good immunity. Now, we all know that the influenza vaccine is not 100%. It is not even 75%. Depending on the individual, and a response, it could be as low as 30%. So if it's a deadly infection, just like this one, or for example, diphtheria and meningococcus, we want something that's actually protective and lasts a long time. And that's not going to be within a few months. I think it's going to take a little longer from a scientific point of view.
Absolutely. And let's look at it knowing that things can change by the day, especially if new data leads to something positive. We've already seen that as far as some things reopening, even if it's recreational stuff like golf courses. But as far as the fall is concerned, it's synonymous with school, and everybody's looking at how schools can return, if at all, based on where we are now. And again, that's where some of what Dr. Fauci was saying earlier today was based and has always been predicated on human behavior. If this, then that. If we don't do this, then that. So that's a huge concern now, not just from parents, but teachers and anybody involved, about how you approach a school year, even as far out as May right now.
So let's take a step back for a minute, and I have to admit that I did not watch Fauci's presentation to the to Congress today. But what I would say is that we could take a step back. We actually have an experiment going on right now as we speak, which is the European school system. In different countries in Europe, they're opening schools. Now, they're not doing it by just saying, okay, here's the bell, get in and run into school and run into your class. There is a clearly measured approach to this. And the big question, of course, is will that measure approach reduce the risks of transmission within the school? Now, if you look at all of the data that we have today, the ones at risk are not the children. The ones at risk are the adults. And depend on the age group of the adults, that who we have to be concerned, which is usually the teachers and those who are administrators and those who have advanced age or multiple medical problems. And you don't want the children who possibly could be carriers bringing that into the school and then inactivating the system. Now, there is also the possibility that they may get infected too. We just don't know. But I think that the experiment is ongoing in Europe, and we need to be cognizant of the results of this experiment and again apply it, because we do have time. We're not opening schools right away. And we may be waiting till the fall to open schools, which gives us enough time to measure the effect of the experiment that's happening in Europe and choose the best approach that has the best results.
What do you think is, as far as even if it's just looking at it from a predictive manner, what is the best approach in order to mitigate or at the very least prevent any type of spread going on in a school? Because you mentioned it's older people, so it might be teachers, it might be the cafeteria staff, it might be the bus driver, it might be
Right.
somebody who you come into contact with that's older than even your typical teacher.
So again, I think that you're hearing this over and over again, at least from the medical community. If there is nobody infected in the school, the people who are at risk are no longer at risk, right? And the only way you're going to know if somebody is infected in school is by being able to test them.
Okay.
So again, we're back to this issue or the conundrum of the testing, the availability of testing, the availability of return of the results of the testing in a timely fashion, not 3 to 4 days, but within hours. And I think that as long as we have that and it's available, I think we could really be reassured if we apply both temperature taking in the, on entry, as well as being able to test repeatedly those who are potentially at risk. I think that's going to shut down, if you will, the opportunity of a resurgence, if a resurgence is going to occur in a school.
What's the belief on any type of ability to avoid versus inevitability? And even look at Seoul, which earlier in the week shut down the bars and nightclubs downtown because there was a setback, if you call it. I don't know if that's due to a false negative who's out and about or somebody who's asymptomatic that came into contact with the wrong person. Whatever the case may be, it feels like for a country that has been used as a model for good reason, if they can't get it right, then it's almost like, what the hell hope do we have getting it right?
So, well, I'm going to leave the second part of the question, but I will tell you that they do have it right. Because what they did was, again, as soon as they saw that there was any increase in risk, they shut things down. They didn't hem and haw about it. Yeah, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's not to worry about. There's no if, and, or buts. They basically said, we have an increase in infection, we're shutting things down, period. And now that they shut things down, then now they can sort to see. And from what I understand, and again, this is secondhand, what I understand, this whole infectious episode that occurred in South Korea was due to one individual who may have been. So again, the point was that the first thing they did was close everything down, then start to look for what the etiology is. And now they may reopen slowly after they clean up the mess. but you need to be decisive when it comes to this. You can't hem and haw, and this is why we can't attach or politicize the events. And you know, the economy needs to open. I don't think there's anybody who, whether it's a scientist or a politician, who believes that we can sustain our livelihood in this country with a shutdown economy. It's just not going to happen. So we have to open the economy. At the same time, we understand that opening the economy is going to be at risk.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have the same approach as the Koreans do, which is we're monitoring, and if the monitor says there's a problem over here, we shut that down immediately with the understanding that it's going to be temporary until we get everything sorted out, and apply again all of the principles that we know work in terms of mitigating the spread of the infection. I think we'll be okay. So it may be 2 steps forward and maybe a step back. This is not going to be a smooth ride.
So it almost seems, I think, crazy in my head to ask this question, because I do feel like the majority of people have accepted where we are from where we've been as progress. But then again, I don't know if data and any type of study and really where we are with this disease, this pandemic, would indicate that. But a month ago, are we now better off, or have we pushed things back? Have we successfully pushed something back, delayed it, or are we truly better off than where we are, not even a month, maybe back farther than that, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, as we've been doing these now? How are we better off due to more recognition and understanding of data, or is it simply we've maybe delayed the hit or any type of major impact of this pandemic?
So that's an excellent question. And again, being thoughtful about this, Eitan, I think that we have to understand a few things. A disease, whether it's an infectious disease or non-infectious disease, has a certain course, right? It either gets better, it stays the same, and get worse, right? So you are asking whether what we're doing is actually helping, right, mitigate the disease. But the answer is a little more complex than that. It could be partly because of the natural course of the disease, which contracts over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there also may be a contribution of everything that we've done to mitigate the spread of the disease, the social distancing, et cetera, right?
Right.
So those work in combination. Which one, are we doing everything right? Well, we may be doing some things right, but at the same time, it may also be partly the natural course of this disease. So in medicine, there's a very strong principle, which is that you always hope for the best, but you have to prepare for the worst.
Right.
Okay. And that is a principle that we adhere to in medicine quite a lot. So we're preparing for the possibility that something bad is going to happen, meaning a resurgence of this disease. But at the same time, we're seeing silver lining in terms of reduction of admissions, reduction in the death rates, even though the news media keeps, increasing the death rates. It's more collection of data as it becomes available. But in fact, we know that the pressure on the healthcare system from this disease is lessening. So it's a combination of the course of the disease, combination of what we're doing, but we have to be prepared that this isn't over. And I think last time you and I spoke, I think I heard myself say, it's getting better, but it's not over.
Right. No, and that's the thing, is when you look at data that comes out about death rates, for example, it's usually behind, right? As far as data is coming to, if it's the news media, whoever is getting the information and reporting on it, as opposed to something that we won't get information on as well for another couple of weeks. And that's the slowing down of the surge. And that's the other end of it. So you basically have two ends of this situation where we're getting it second or maybe even third hand. But the big thing that jumps out is that we are slowing down, if we haven't already stopped the surge, and we're seeing a decline in acceptance as opposed to maybe an increase in data of death that comes in, but that's all retro as opposed to stuff that's new and currently happening.
That's correct. So part of it is retro data, but the other part, of course, is you don't know if Uncle Joe, who died at home, tested positive for COVID-19 and then had a very bad bout of whatever and died at home.
Right.
Because again, the death rates in different areas remain unchanged over time. And they may have, increased a little bit, but not enough to create a panic by any means, the way it did in New York City. But we just don't know how many people perished at home. And I think the estimates of these mortality rates are off. They're probably conservative because they rely on reports from positive testing in a hospital and somebody may be dying in the hospital versus someone dying at home and not being tested,
Right.
but dying from the COVID-19.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. Congrats on another grandchild.
Well, and you on being an uncle times two. Great.
Yep. What a miracle during this time, right? So
It's amazing.
they're good
I don't know
signs
if you
all around.
remember Usher's father, Itzik, from Pardes Hanna, but it's interesting how everything is tied together. Your grandfather died on the 12th, right?
Right.
And Itzik died also on the 12th of May. So it's very interesting how these cycles, whatever they mean, but it's just very interesting how this is done.
Yeah. Well, not the same month of the 12th, though.
No, it's just the sort of the number or whatever it is.
Well, I'm born on the 12th, too.
I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
And your great grandfather, not your grandfather, also perished on the 12th. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know. All connected with 12.
There's
All
something.
right.
There's some connection.
Well, congrats again. We'll chat next week.
You too. And say hi to Angela and everybody else.